Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video on the Elva Seeks Myth comp for Clan Boss. So, in this video, I want to do a recap, kind of the liner notes, TLDR version of the first video for the comp, and then show you some of the possible champions you can use. And in the comments, I would love for you to let me know what DPS champions you would like to use with this comp. Even if you don't have Elva, Seeker, Demitha, if you don't, those are the three you have to make it work. But even if you don't have them, if you could put this comp together, what two DPS champions would you love to try together? Because, again, that was the genesis of this, and I found some guidance in a couple of videos, and this was originally based on the Myth Fu speed tune, and I'm on Deadwoodjedi.com using the speed tune calculator for Clan Boss. See that right now? See that right now? Deadwoodjedi.com. So yeah, the genesis of this was I was using the ultimate Myth Eris comp with the 3-1 DPS using Jintoro. And in that comp, and I can show it to you right quick. It's on the second page. Here at the bottom. You can see here. So, regardless of who you're using as your DPS, you needed 4 champions really to make this work, with very, very few possibilities for substitutes. Demitha, Eris, Deacon, and Seeker. So I wanted to find what I considered to be kind of a holy grail comp for fast, unkillable teams, which is being able to be unkillable with only 3 support champions and have 2 DPS and still have these kinds of speeds at play. Because there's other comps that you can use that have 2 or even 3 DPS champions, but they're much, much slower. And I've tried those, and I find that because of the slowness, you're losing a lot of damage potential. You end up not doing as much damage. Even if each of your DPS champions is doing more damage, because it's a slower tune, you can devote more to the damage stats. Even if they're doing a lot more damage per hit, the fact that they do so many less hits, so many fewer hits, impacts the potential overall damage that you can do. So I was looking for that holy grail of a fast team that has 2 DPS champions. And Elva, I thought, could make it possible, because Elva potentially could replace Deacon and Eris. She had the speed aura, not the turn meter boost. That was the thing that was missing. But she had the aura and the ability to clean or even block debuffs. So I thought it could be possible to put together a team using Demitha, Seeker, and Elva, getting rid of these 2, and having 2 spots for DPS champions. And I found the guidance I needed, some help with getting in the ballpark for the speeds I needed, and I found my speed tuned. And I using Jintoro and Draco for that incredible synergy they got. Because you can turn off Draco's A3, so he can just do pure damage, and Jintoro can take care of doing the drop defense and weaken debuffs. And he does it with his biggest hit, so he doesn't lose any damage from it. So you get that incredible synergy from the 2. So again, I want you to put in the comments, what champions would you love to try together? And really the only limitation on that is that because of the way this works, Elva is going second in the turn order instead of first like Eris would. So you can't have the stun go on Elva or your 3-1, or in the case of Turvold here, 4-1-5-1, which is just funny to me. He's still only doing damage on 3 turns, on 3 of the turns, but still it's funny. Just seeing how many turns it's possible for him to take. But yeah, in this case, Turvold and Elva cannot take the stun. So the best way to avoid Elva taking the stun, because she is your leader, which makes her a higher priority target sometimes, you put the Steadfast Mastery on her. And the clan boss sees that as a buff, so it makes that champion, a champion with Steadfast, a lower priority target. So you can also use that on your DPS champion, your 3-1 DPS champion, and it'll have the same effect. Or, just to be certain, you can make sure that Demytha, Seeker, and your 2-1 DPS are better targets for the stun than your 3-1. And really, if you're using a magic champion 3-1, you're probably fine, because Seeker or Demytha will probably take the stun instead. And if you're using a magic 2-1 DPS like I am, Jintoro and Dracomorph are both magic affinity, either Seeker, Draco, or Demytha will always be the stun target. I've been running that, and it's a full auto team with Jintoro. I've been running it for a while now, and I have yet to have it fall out of sync. So it really is an almost perfect team comp. And it works perfectly on Ultra Nightmare, Nightmare, and Brutal without any changes needed. And some of that is down to Jintoro's passive. Because I found with other champions, and I didn't realize this before, if you go to Brutal, it will fall out of sync unless you tweak things a little bit. In the case of this particular comp, let's see. There's a Brutal. Turvold is there. Usually all you have to do, so far that I've found, is adding an extra turn delay on Demytha will get you there. Sometimes it's a bit trickier. I have some pictures, some screenshots I took. Where is it? Turvold Brutal. Okay. Yeah. It's a 4-turn delay on Demytha's A2, and you're good. For Turvold on Brutal. But again, on Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare, you can get away with the same comp. Just that 1-turn delay. In fact, you can sometimes even, depending on the champions, you can get away with not having a delay on the A2 at all, but usually you need it. So that's using Turvold. So, what are some other possibilities? I thought 2 of the hardest hitting champs right now that you can possibly that's the one. It would be Acrisia and Nut. And as you can see, completely plug and play for them. For Brutal, again, you just need that extra delay on Demythis A2 and you're fine. So there are two of your hardest hitting champions available in the tune right there. And you can throw in, if you don't have one of them, but maybe you have Septimus, who is also an extremely hard hitter. You could use him. I found you can even use Theodore. And he, again, completely plug and play. It doesn't seem to make any damn difference whether he's the... let's say you wanted to use Fane, for example. She's Spirit Affinity, and you wanted to use Theodore as your 2-1 instead of your 3-1. That's on Brutal. Now, I think in this case, you can actually get away with Theodore as the 2-1. You don't need to put as much delays on Demytha, but it's still basically plug and play either way, because Elva is using her speed boost ability right at the beginning, and she goes before Theodore, and it gets extended right off the bat, or extended pretty quickly as well. It doesn't matter that Theodore also places a speed boost a buff. And I think on Brutal it does break it. Actually, in this case, it doesn't seem to. So Theodore is one that does not break it, because in this case, the speed buff is applied by him, and that keeps it going that much quicker. I believe I found a way. There was something that you could do with him that was a bit odd, I noticed. I'm trying to remember. I don't think, was it? See, that can mess it up. Make it take longer, really. There's something I found with Theodore. That was a little bit weird. Maybe it was when he was the 3-1 that you could get it to sync up even quicker with him. Doesn't seem to be working on Brutal. But as you can see, he's plug and play. Turvold is plug and play. This would be a really great combo that you could use, because you got Theodore doing the poison explosion, Fane's putting out the debuffs that you need, the weaken and drop defense and poisons. You could also use somebody like Walking Tomb Drang to put HP burns out, and he does HP burn explosion, Theodore does HP burn explosion. So if you didn't want to use Tomb Drang, now, I don't know about other spirit champs that might fit in real well. But if you wanted to do something like that, you could very easily. If you want champions that pretty much anybody can get their hands on, you could do something like a Rosin and Drexstar team up there. You got Drexstar doing some HP burn shenanigans, and you got Rosin throwing out your debuffs that you need, so they could do some good damage, and they are very free to play, accessible. DPS champions. So yeah, I mean, again, the only real thing you have to worry about is making sure that that 3-1 DPS does not take the stun. And the easiest way to make sure that happens is making your 2-1 DPS the same affinity. Other than that, you can also put the steadfast mastery on them, and that will also pretty much cover your ass. So you can use really any combination you damn well please. So let me show you a few others. I don't think it's necessarily optimal to use someone like Farrakhan or Lanicus in this build, because I don't think ally attack is going to allow you to do as much damage as just another pure DPS guy or girl. Thing, whatever. But you can have them in the comp. Now, Farrakhan is a little bit finicky because I believe the problem is that Demitha gets too many buffs on her. So you have to be careful about when she is getting buffed, how many she's getting. I believe that you have to... For Farrakhan, you can use him plug and play, basically, but you drop out the delay on the A2 completely. For Ultra Nightmare and I believe Nightmare as well. Yes. With Brutal, things get a little bit funky. And I believe you have to have that 2-turn delay. Otherwise, you're fine. With Farrakhan in the 3-1. Now, if you wanted to switch this around, and let's go back to, say, Fane, because I believe Farrakhan is a spirit affinity. Check and make sure. Yes, he is. Just to making sure. If he's in the 2-1, again, you're going to run into some issues. And I believe, going back to Ultra Nightmare, syncs up just fine. In this case, you can get away with having the delay or not, with or without it, for Ultra Nightmare. Nightmare still works, but again, Brutal, you have to have that extra turn of delay. Otherwise, it works. And again, I believe the issue there is just Demitha getting too many buffs on her. And not being able to apply block damage to herself. See, this is an issue. I hadn't noticed this before. It's entirely possible this won't work. Not like that. Let me look at the Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare. So Demitha is not getting the block damage in the second turn on this one. So there might be an issue with Farrakhan here. Let me see. Okay, that's not doing it. All we're doing here is shifting around when the... So you might not be able to use Farrakhan in this comp after all. I hadn't realized... Again, sometimes I only pay attention to if people are in the right positions. See, the problem here is that you get the turn sync up, but Demitha is going to get killed using this comp because she is getting too many buffs on her. Now, it may not happen because this just seems to be assuming that she's going to end up with all of these heals on her. But yeah, it's entirely possible that using Farrakhan could be impossible, at least as a 2-1. Let's go ahead and switch these around and see if he's possible as the 3-1. So are we going to run into the same problem? So Ultra Nightmare, and the answer is yes, the same problem is present. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we can use Farrakhan in this comp. Alright, let's see if we can get away with using Lanicus. That could burn her in the same way. Now, the way to get her in tune, you would have to put a 4-turn delay. Lanicus is viable, it looks like. Lanicus stays viable. So the block damage is going out consistently, so we're not losing the block damage. That's the concern. So Lanicus is still viable on Ultra Nightmare. Brutal required a little bit of extra fine-tuning. Took me a while to get this to work. You have to take Demitha up to a 5-turn delay. Is it viable? Not viable on Brutal. At least I didn't get it there. I'm just messing around to see if this is viable at all. See, Brutal is where things start to get tricky a lot of the time, because it can be things that work just fine for Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare, but get super tricky for Brutal. So I don't think that this is viable on Brutal, at least not currently. But it looks like it is viable, possibly. No delay. If you put no delay on Demitha's A2, it's viable for Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare with Lanicus. Farrakhan doesn't seem to be viable. Now I can try putting him in here and seeing if now, see, it almost seems viable, except that every so often you lose the block damage buff going on to Demitha, and that's going to get her killed and kill the two. I don't think Farrakhan is viable. It's just he's putting out too many extra buffs, and there's not enough time for them to drop off a Demitha, so she is having the block damage fall off of her, or not be able to be applied periodically, and that would get her killed and destroy the toon. So Farrakhan is not viable. So that I guess that is a new thing I've discovered right there. Another thing you have to be careful about is too many buffs. Because Demitha is extending all the buffs that are going on to everybody, you potentially get into a situation where there are too many buffs on your champions, and either the speed buff can drop off, or like with Farrakhan here, and Lanicus on the brutal comp, she isn't able to apply the block damage to herself, and that will kill the comp. That will kill the speed toon, because she'll be killed eventually. She'd still be able to survive quite a while, probably, but it would not be able to run the full 49 turns because she would be killed way before then. You probably would be lucky to get past the 20s. You might get it into the 30s if she's tanky. Because she would be getting healed up a lot. So it's not completely inviable. It's just that it's not going to be a true unkillable team. She will eventually get killed. So Farrakhan and Lanicus, Farrakhan not viable at all so far that I personally have found here. Lanicus viable on Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare, which is really all you're going to care about anyway. But also, going back to what I said at the beginning, I don't know that an ally attack champion is really useful in this team anyway, or even a counter attack champion. Because generally speaking, champions that put up that use ally attack or counter attack, and there's very few that put counter attack on the whole team anyway. Most of them don't do a lot of damage themselves, and since your Seeker, Demitha, and Elva probably are not going to be doing a whole lot of damage in this comp because of the speed requirements. You know, with the toon that I've got, Seeker is in toxic gear, so he does some decent damage on the side, but Demitha and Elva don't break 10 million each. They still do some, 7 to 9-ish in that area, depending on affinity. Maybe 6 to 9, depending on affinity. Demitha doesn't care about affinity. She always does somewhere in that 8 to million, 7, 8 million range. But they're not really there to do damage. And like I said, you put Seeker in toxic gear and he'll do quite a bit of extra damage. He usually does around 15-ish, I want to say. 14, 15-ish. But they are not going to do a lot of extra damage with an ally attacker or counter attack in place. Or a counter attack champion. Because you can put counter attack accessories on them and occasionally get extra attack hits from that. So really, I don't think you want to go with an ally attacker or a counter attack team buff anyway, like Valkyrie or Skull Crusher, because I think your best bet is just another damage dealer, just straight damage. So I think that covers all of the things I was playing around with. There was one other thing. It's weird, I could not get this to work at all on Ultra Nightmare, but maybe some of the math brains that know the speed calculator better than me can make this work. And it was actually having two of the biggest pain in the ass deep champions to speed tune on the same team, and that is Jintoro and Ninja. The duet that you didn't know you wanted and probably don't want. And you can get away with having Jintoro back down at 260. But yes, you actually can have it, and it's basically plug and play with Demitha having no delay on the A2, and it works. It breaks on Ultra Nightmare, and nothing I could come up with made it work. For whatever reason. But, weirdly enough, actually there was an issue here. Okay, I was wrong. It isn't plug and play, I forgot. Whoopsie doopsie. And Seeker has no. There you go. Now you're synced up. Yeah. And it stays in sync. No, this is also a problem I found later on. So this actually isn't something you can do. It won't work because Elva is not in the right place to clear off the debuffs, and I don't think that her block debuffs would stay on long enough. Maybe, because they need to be there in place for the stun. So in this particular comp, with Elva's A2 going off in her middle turn, does block debuff stay up long enough after the stun to protect everybody? It might actually be viable. The block debuffs might be in place. It looks like the block debuffs is in place on everybody after the stun. So it looks like you would be able to do this. But again, maybe somebody can figure out a way to get it to work for Ultra Nightmare, and you can have the brag that you have Ninja and Jintoro on the same team. But again, I couldn't get it to work. Somebody else might be able to. But for whatever reason, it works on Nightmare, it works on Brutal, works on Hard, and on Normal. It's the damnedest thing. It breaks on Easy, it breaks on Ultra Nightmare. I could not get it to work on Ultra Nightmare. Again, I don't know if it's an issue that somebody, the speeds need to be a bit different, or if it's, again, just something in the delays of the different champions involved that needs to be altered. I could not get it to work. I played with it for quite a while. But it looks like because of Demitha extending the block debuffs, it actually would be in place to block the stun. And it looks like it would also be in place to prevent the isn't it? The Spirit is the one that does the slow debuff, the slowing debuff. But it looks like everything stays synced up still. So yeah. Again, if you want to just be able to brag that you have a team that has Ninja and Jintoro on it, there you go. Just for shits and giggles. So I think that covers everything I was going to talk about. Um, again, about using the speed calculator. Make sure you have your speeds in, your sets in, Lore of Steel. Make sure your speed aura is put in there correctly. Make sure you're on the right difficulties, the right affinities, if that could be an issue. Usually, starting on Void is fine. And make sure you're not using masteries that can screw up your speed tunes. Other than that, you should be fine. And there's some of the possibilities that you can use for the comp. Like I said, let me know in the comments what two DPS champions you would love to combine together and see how they work together. Keeping in mind that you have to protect your 3-1 DPS champion in Elva. That's the only stipulations. Who would you love to use in this comp? And also any other comments you'd like to leave. And of course, likes are always appreciated, as is sharing the video, because dislikes, if you didn't like the video, that counts as an interaction as well, really. Because the way YouTube works now is that the more interactions the video gets, views, likes, subscribes, comments, sharing, the more interaction, the more people it's going to put the video in front of. And for longer videos like this, if you think people should see it, it's vitally important that you take those few extra moments to do those interactions, because YouTube is pushing more and more for these stupid TikTok competitive, trying to compete with TikTok in these dumbass shorts videos that they're pushing now. So longer videos like this need all the interaction they can get. And that goes for everybody you watch on YouTube. And of course, in addition to occasionally putting up videos like this, I also on this channel will be doing some, for like Dungeons and Dragons, RPG stuff, character builds, heavily story based for the character builds. I'm also going to be getting into doing world building, which would be beneficial for anybody doing RPGs, as a dungeon master, game master, as well as creative writing and game design. Anything that has to do with world, that you might want to do some world building in. So if that stuff interests you, or if you want to be notified when I do put these kinds of videos up, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want the notification, you have to hit the bell. So, all that wonderful YouTube nonsense out of the way. Thank you very much for watching. I very much appreciate it. I'll see y'all in the next one. See you later.